Welcome back to another episode of Breakneck, where we talk about AI and all of the changes in the technology industry from the perspective of people building companies. Today, we have Anibal Abarca, who is the CEO of Neuforce, serial entrepreneur, good friend, and also a widely syndicated columnist on the topic of technology in Wired and other newspapers and periodicals. On many boards. The whole episode is going to be gone before I stop the intro on Anibal. We're very happy to have him here. And of course, alongside me is Ian, the CEO of
Hi,
Beppo.
folks.
And I'm Matt, CEO of a new company called Pact. So let's jump into it. First question I had for you, Anibal, just to get it started is, you're talking to so many companies, both at the board level and as a consultant, and thinking about where AI is going. What are the things that people need to be doing right now? Not in a year, not in 18 months, but just right now, what are the main things that people should be considering immediately?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and Ian and Matt. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is a topic that I'm very excited about. So it's always a great experience to have a conversation around this, and especially with people that are involved in the same space and are working with very interesting products and companies. One of the things that I notice is still, even though companies are saying that they are making progress with AI, I don't think they are really making any progress, right? Like the when probably when we started talking about the next generation of services, at least a year or 2 years ago, I think like it was acceptable to be thinking, okay, how can we create this AI integration in our product? How can we start bringing LLMs to certain workflows? And on the software development lifecycle, we were talking about implementing GitHub Copilot, right? And the problem is that I still see that companies are stuck in that phase, and they are not coming out from that. They are last year when I was chatting and doing a lot of research for Neoforce, I started noticing that many companies are probably last year they did a couple of projects, like interesting projects with AI, and they really like the results. They are convinced that this is the technology that is going to basically change everything. And then when I ask them, okay, so what's the roadmap for 2025 and what are you going to be doing? It's pretty much the same. It's, oh, well, yeah, we're going to do a couple of other projects, right? Like, okay, but now it's easier than ever is to build technology. The AI software and technology is moving so fast. And why is that you are going slow? So I would say short answer is like you should definitely go faster and all in into this transformation. And I don't see it yet.
Where do you think they should be, Anibal? Where were you expecting them to be?
A couple of weeks ago, I had a workshop with a financial services company here in Mexico, and it was very focused on the IT department, right? Like the audience was about 40 people from the software engineering and IT departments across three different business units. And when I started asking about where they are and how are they doing, I noticed that, and most of them were in, let's say that 20 to 30% of the audience were starting to use tools as GitHub Copilot. But then the same question I asked to a fintech company, like we can call it a digital native, and they were pretty much in the same stage. So definitely they should be higher than that. But not only that, when we started digging into where should they be today or where should they be at the end of the year, it's not longer about using GitHub Copilot. It's about you should have like a fleet of agents working along with your team, and they should be taking care of autonomous tasks like maintaining integrations, even working on application modernization, right? Like I guess this is a very specific example on the software development lifecycle, but I am I am sure that probably if today is too early to call that this should be the same for other business areas, I will agree with that, right? Like I think software engineering is showing us the way on where this is going. Software engineering should be there. Like you should have agents developing with you and your teams. Probably in 6 months, we should have agents collaborating with all of us in our company, right? In multiple business processes. Software engineering, I think it's there, and it's something that should be happening right now.
What do you think are the
And in
main
that case, the answer was zero, right? How many agents do you have in both digital natives and more traditional companies? The answer is still zero.
What do you think are the main blockers for adoption? Is it momentum, or, just kind of like inertia, or is it integrating with teams who aren't ready to make the change? Is it their business processes are getting in the way? Is it just lack of urgency? Like what's preventing people? Like why aren't people making changes that are immediately beneficial?
I guess it's a status quo, no? Like in this case, they were not even thinking about that. Okay, yeah, we're doing modernization and we're doing it the same way we used to do it 3 years ago, and they're expecting to have a 12 to 18 month cycle to finalize that project, and they're doing okay, right? And I probably sense of urgency, probably lack of understanding that the availability of the technology. Um, I guess it's more about that. I don't think there is a adversity f- to change or to adapt. Of course, that comes after, but it's lack of awareness. I will say that's also something very important.
If you were to, the way you're describing is super interesting to me. If you were to look across the business, kind of take a slice across and look into sort of into each function, it sounds like what you're saying is if you looked into the software development group, you're like, oh, there's a bunch of AI stuff they're working on in there. But if you went to finance or product or marketing, or it sounds like they've got a bunch of work to do, which is kind of to absorb what the opportunities are and how to actually kind of reposition their function, their role, deliver the outcomes they want using AI, right? And that was a really important thing for software development to do. The pressure's been on. So they've been on it, but it sounds like other departments are not quite doing that yet. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely, and I think that is logical. No, they are farther away from the technology. They, I mean, the technology is still very hard, or at least it's hard for non-technical users. It's very fragmented. So yes, I think it's definitely we have to get there, but it's harder to get with the business departments or other areas outside the technology. Because even in technology, this is hard. But that's how I feel. That's what I'm sensing in the conversations I'm having with customers.
How would you characterize the benefits in terms of faster development or lower cost, and like roughly, just state of the art Q1 2025 is what we just ended. Where and what should people expect if they did make that investment for a project or a division of their company to really go aggressively into AI and agents?
It depends on the use case. We at Neuforce, that's what we are doing. We're offering nano employees as a service, right? Which is and not focus on the software development lifecycle, focus on business processes. In most of the scenarios we're currently working with the customers, we're talking about at least 50% savings in the particular jobs to be done that the agents are taking care of. No, um, at least, and that is the baseline, because remember that once you start automating these processes with the capabilities of AI, things are going to get better and cheaper, right? And most likely very, very fast. So if that saving can happen almost immediately, probably in 6 months, we're going to be talking about 90% savings from the initial estimate. In terms of software, and this is again, we are not offering this, and this is not part of what the Neo4 services, but since we start with most of the CEOs and CTOs to understand what's their business strategy and to kind of evangelize how to adopt AI, um, software engineering has been one of the key areas where we identify opportunities. So we have been doing a lot of research. And in traditional projects that are kind of migrations, application modernizations, just common maintenance on integrations and APIs, it can be up to 5x, 10x the increase of velocity, going from probably 3 months, 18 months to 3 months to complete a project. And instead of having a big team, or at least a squad of engineers, you have a couple of engineers working along different AI agents. So we are still very early in the market, but the use cases and the success stories are already emerging. So I believe it's super interesting to see how companies that are leading the way are seeing those benefits, but most of the companies are not even thinking that this is possible.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when Amazon came into Latin America, is that you had a whole bunch of, and this is something, we saw, it's like you had a whole bunch of retail businesses that had essentially assumed there was going to be very little competition. And then Amazon came in very aggressively, or you might make the same case with Nubank coming in from Brazil, into the Mexican market and other Latin American markets. And then suddenly this outside force forced everyone to modernize much, much faster. And I'm wondering, you know, is the same thing going to happen again with AI, that suddenly there's going to be a hyper competitive company entering these markets, whether in the US or Europe or Latin America, that has adopted all of these things. And then instead of it being a gradual change, it's going to be a shock where a lot of companies are going to be completely offside and not have the time to make these changes 18 months from now.
I think so, and this is, I haven't seen clear examples, like real life examples, but I can see that evolving, right? And we have seen probably lots of press around the AI native companies, and among them we have seen examples from Cursor, even OpenAI, right? Like mostly digital and AI companies that are in this space, and that they are behaving as AI native companies. That's true. Outside those very niche players and also highly sophisticated players, I haven't seen real examples. But when you start thinking about the capabilities of how can you accelerate multiple processes or multiple steps, units in your company that are executing jobs to be done in an autonomous way, that can improve autonomously, that are going to be improving not only in performance but in cost over time, you can see that those companies that are embracing that mindset, that methodology, that architecture, and even organization structure and mindset, they're going to be much more faster, right? And even more those that build on top of previous, let's call it, technology platforms, right? Like if you have a distribution channel that is digital and you have network effects, and on top of that you are building on AI native capabilities, you're going to be unstoppable, no? How does it work for a more traditional company? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that transformation happens.
What's the conversation like? We noted that you're on a bunch of different boards and hopefully privy to some of the conversations. For the non-digital savvy, AI centered type of businesses, a little bit more traditional businesses, what's the conversation like at the board level? Are they freaking out about AI? Are they, because I mean, at some level, the imperative needs to come from the board for the folks kind of functionally to say, yeah, okay, I can set aside 25% of my time to get up to speed. So give us a sense of the urgency around the conversation.
I don't think they're freaking out. They are curious about, okay, what are we going to do and how can we leverage this? I don't feel that they are super serious about the opportunity and about the what they are doing. Neither on on how they are investing, right? Like I feel like most of the real transformation efforts are still focused on the more traditional digital transformation. They are launching new products. They are building some innovation initiatives. I don't think AI is at that level yet. I feel like it's still like, oh, it's interesting. We should learn more about it. We should start doing something. But I don't get that sense of urgency and importance of a big transformation. I don't know
If you
what you
were,
are
if you
seeing.
were, yeah, well, it kind of, for me, opens up a sort of an interesting question is as we look forward, the three of us know change is coming. The only question is how quickly and where and when and what. And so I'm really interested in this question of what are the indicators or the markers that you might see that you would say, uh-oh, this is happening because I'm seeing that type of thing. And the one that I'm on the lookout for is kind of outcome-based pricing. We're already seeing some shifts that way, but maybe this is for both of you guys. I mean, what are you thinking about when you see this thing happen or that thing happen? We're really on the road. So I don't know, Annabelle, is there anything that kind of strikes you?
I think, and this has become more evident in the past few weeks. I feel that that is going to be very evident when we see how companies are really embracing the idea of having agents as these like co-workers or nano employees, right? Like when you start seeing like, oh yeah, my IT department now has 50 agents that are taking care of all of these processes. And probably 6 months ago they had none, right? I feel that is going to be a huge step into that direction. It's probably going to take a while still for most companies, but I see that coming, and I think that's going to change because that is going to be very evident that we're not longer talking about technology. We're talking about work. We're talking about the jobs to be done we have in the company. And the conversation changes from, oh, which framework you are using? Are you using this model or the other one? Into, oh yeah, like how is that you are building this workforce that is fully autonomous and
Yeah.
and AI powered, no?
Ian, I think that's a really good question of what will you see. And Anibal, it's not just that it goes from no agents to agents, but of course there's going to be companies building very fine-tuned, highly expert agents, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so it's not going to be the shift between no agents and agents. You can build agents internally. You can make a little agent for yourself. I remember you were talking at South by Southwest with somebody who's building agents herself and wanted help. And I think that's going to be the shift is going from internal based knowledge to using agents that are built by an outside firm. That's going from an internal process to an external process. And setting your company up to be able to work with outside processes. Now, we've built services companies in the past. That's a big shift. And when it works extremely well. Now you have this extremely cheap, essentially services company that you're outsourcing it to. And you're saying, hey, this is something that we don't have the expertise to do internally at this price point. And that's a big shift. And once you go over that line, then it opens the floodgates. But I think that's a good segue, and I'll use it because we are trying to keep the show on track, on time, short. Um, what do you think, you write for Wired, you talk to, not just boardrooms, but then big general audiences, so you get to think about the long-term future. What is resonating with how I think the future that I agree with you on, I've read your pieces, so I'm more aligned internally, but what's working in terms of communicating the big future, the 5, 6 year time frame? How are companies going to change? How are the industry going to change? How are the economics and market structures going to change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel that and it's going to sound repetitive, but answering this, like specific to what is resonating, I feel like the concept of agents as nano employees, it it has driven very interesting conversations because it becomes very tangible. Oh yeah, like if I had a person or a nano employee that is helping me on these particular tasks and it can run autonomously, and it's not about technology, it's just about the work that has to be done with performance, with feedback, with collaboration, like they say, like that makes total sense, right? Like I see that happening. I see that coming. I see how can I embrace that and bring it to the company, right? So that's on one side. um, I've been trying to push for a concept and Matt, we discussed together that I kind of call quantum organizations, right? And quantum organizations are kind of the next leap into that evolution of that are not only exponential from many reasons that digital platforms brought to us, very, very low or cost close to zero distribution cost, network effects, and many more, right? When what happens after is, okay, so far we have been organizing in a way that we we manage our work in very discrete large objects, departments, even people, roles and responsibilities, and we manage everything we do in terms of projects, right, resources, time, um, and deliverables. The next part will be how if we can start building very, very small quantas, very small economic agents that are operating across the organization, that are autonomous, that can take care of those jobs to be done, that can improve over time without the requirement of human involvement, probably, of course, human collaboration. And what's going to happen once that covers like large amounts of processes and covers a lot of the complexity across the organization, like those organizations are going to look entirely different than current organizations. And the second part there is that the the continuous improvement, right? Like you break the laws of resources and time and materials constraints, and you can really focus on outcome management or outcome driven management. So that's kind of a very probably abstract concept. I think it's
Love,
still
love the way
developing, but
you put that together. And Ian, I see you saying like, okay, quantum, does the physicist approve? And I absolutely love. As a physicist, I've worked in quantum mechanics for many, many years in long, long hours. And what I love about quantum organization is that things are going to be faster, smaller. They have these nano workers working on much faster time scale, and last outcome driven. And that's the thing we talk about quantum. Things don't happen continuously; they happen in these jumps. And making sure that you give agents chunks of work. You don't want a little help from an agent. That's like a co-pilot. You might get a little code completion here and there, but now the big movement is from everything kind of happening the normal way, the classical way, but slightly faster to this. No, we're going to give this whole project to an outside agent who has its own way of doing things, and we're just going to check the results. That's that quantum jump. It's in one state, and then when you come back, it's in another state. It's a very different way of working that people aren't used to. They're used to kind of just checking in or getting help from these co-pilots or from their existing teams. And so I like that framework of quantum organizations to talk about the styles of changes that are going to come in. And agents are really what's going to nucleate that change from what's existing now, which is like, oh, I need this translated. Well, that happened. That was easier, but it's not changing. Hey, I want this entire project back in a week. You hand it off to an agent. They consume $4,000 worth of resources, but they do the work of 50 people. Is that's those are the big changes that I would see coming from a quantum organization.
yeah, it's still very early, but I feel that I can see that coming, and when that starts to on unfold into real case studies, into real examples beyond those like unicorn, like super sophisticated AI native companies that we are seeing now, I think it's going to be very interesting.
So, Anibal, there's a little bit of a running joke here with Matt about predicting how long these things are going to take. And he has a structure which he can share kind of that I think he got from his physics grant writing days. Basically 10 years out is, I don't know if it's ever going to be possible, right? But this kind of re-architecting of the way we run business is fundamental. Like I would hate to try and attempt this at an enterprise business, today. So it's not a moment's work, but if you were to guess, when will we see it most quickly and where? Like, what's the timeline to see it? And in what type of business might we see this kind of re-architecting of an enterprise or a business?
In enterprise, I don't know. It's going to be it's hard to predict. I see that happening this year already, and all small companies, startups, like new ventures, like there is no reason why they are not operating this way. At least in important processes across the organization. And probably at the end of the year, we're going to see a lot more examples of that, right? The enterprise is always tough, no? We have been talking about digital transformation for the past probably 10 years, and we're still there.
At
So
least, yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, Ian, that covers the brief topics we were hoping to cover with you, Anibal. Thank you so much for joining. Ian always wants to kind of get a sense of what happened this week. What's the news? So, Ian, what did you
Yeah, well,
see?
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Annabelle, a little bit. So we're all fascinated by all this stuff. And the question I always ask Matt is, what did you see this week that grabbed your attention? And last week for me, it was like Gemini's robotics. But is there anything can be a kind of a side projecty type thing? But what's come across your desk this week or in the last couple of weeks that really kind of caught your attention? And Matt, I'm putting Annabelle on the spot here. So if you want to go first, Matt, feel free
Yeah,
to.
Anibal, if you want to think, 'cause he always catches me, and I know it's coming, but it always flusters me. But this time I'm prepared. I spent all weekend, like literally from the moment it came out. I was on my family WhatsApp channel. I was sending all my friends these pictures with OpenAI just released a multimodal image generation, which it did image generation before, but it essentially passed some instructions off to a separate service and then kind of came back. And what they released this week with the 4.0 model is a reasoning based image generation, which just is in an entirely different level. So highly accurate images, huge amounts of control, and it really changed. I mean, what's possible. And I think over the weekend, the meme was the Studio Ghibli. I don't know how to pronounce this Japanese, where everybody was making something look like even the White House released like they were detaining some immigrant or criminal, whatever they said they were, and they put it in the Studio Ghibli and released it under the White House. Everyone complained about it, but this real, just everybody was creating these images, and it was a real breakthrough. It was kind of like one of those killer app moments where it's like, oh, this is exciting. But I'm really excited as well for if it can do this with images, what can it do with deck generation and all, especially multimodal stuff for creating presentations, because that's what I do half the day is put presentations together for people. And so I'm very excited about see where this is going. But I think it was a wake up call for me about the benefits of combining the reasoning, most advanced models very deeply with image generation and text generation. Anyway, Anibal, what do you got?
Um, Definitely not such a thoughtful answer around that, but we definitely have been chatting a lot about image generation, especially with ChatGPT, and we have tried. We have been playing around with that. We have been kind of discussing how to address or how to touch on that for our column in Wired. So definitely that is part of the highlights in the past week. The other one that probably feels older by the speed that things are moving, but it still has been part of multiple conversations in the past 2 weeks is MCP protocol. Um, and how to architect agentic solutions and tools and services with that approach, and that continues to be part of the uh, architecture conversations, design conversations that we're having internally, and I still read a lot in several outlets that it's a hot topic. I feel that it has a lot of potential. I think it makes a lot of sense and makes things very simple to architect, to visualize. And so we're actually using it as well and working with that.
Well, Anibal, thank you so much for joining. It's been enlightening. And again, like the point of this show is really not to talk about things that no one's ever heard of, but really to contextualize things on the ground. So if you're listening, it's like, oh, that's what Anibal saw this week by talking to important people in positions of power. So it's an absolutely incredible perspective that you bring to things, and I'm always looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Again, you write in Wired, you write in several other periodicals, and you're on podcasts too. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Matt and
Thanks,
Ian. It's been
Annabelle.
a pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll
Thank
see
you.
you next time. Ian, any parting words?
No, that's it for this week. Let's land the plane. Thanks, fellas.
Adios.
Bye.
Right?